the MCAT CARS podcast, session number 3. The CARS section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or are a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you are ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. Welcome to the MCAT CARS podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here every week, where I sit with Jack Westin, founder of Jack Westin, the prep program, helping you maximize your CARS section and every section of the MCAT for that matter. This week, we're diving into a pretty interesting Gizmodo article with hot tubs. All right, Jack, back for some more MCAT CARS podcasts. I'm excited to read some more, to try to understand some more, to comprehend some more. So we have a article today that I think is going to be exciting because I'm a huge tech nerd, and this article seems to be right up my alley.
Yeah, so right before we got started here, you asked a very important question, and I want to kind of address that. So you asked, basically, should I read the title right before I go into it? And my answer is no. Don't read the title, because the title could actually distract you. Now, if you're not familiar with the MCAT, at the bottom of every passage on the actual test, they give you the title, the source, right, where it comes from. In some cases, it could help you, but generally speaking, I would say don't look at it unless you're completely lost, right? And if you're getting to the questions and you have a question, you just don't know what you're reading, at that point, maybe you want to read the title and use that title to help you. But the reason why I say that is because they could pull out 6-7 paragraphs from any part of the book, any part, or novel or essay or whatever. It might not have anything to do with the title, because as you know, when you build an essay or a thesis, you may go into a range of different topics that have nothing to do with your actual title. So unless you're really, really lost, I would say generally don't read that title and just go in with this blank slate, and you should be okay. But in some cases, if you really don't know what's going on, you may want to read that title at the very end. It's literally at the footnotes, right? And if you read those, you may get something out of it. But generally speaking, don't make it a habit to just always read those. I think it's kind of a waste of your time, and it may actually lead to a distraction from the actual piece. This is something that most pre-medical students are probably not interested in. So that's why I love it. All right, let's see if you can pay attention to something you may not be interested in.
All right, so our article, if you want to follow along, just go to MCATCarsPodcast.com. Find the show notes, the blog post specifically for this episode, and you can follow along with us. It's a Gizmodo article, which I really love Gizmodo, so I'm excited for this one. All right, in a hot tub in 2012, physicist Seth Lloyd pitched a quantum internet application to Google's Sergey Brin and Larry Page. So I'm a little scared already because we have 3 names already thrown at us and this quantum internet application. And I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to understand anything from this. So that's my pre-med brain going, right? If I was reading this on the MCAT, I'd be like, oh, darn.
Yeah. So let's try to break it down, right?
So hot tub 2012. I got that part. That's good.
See, that's so weird, right? Why are we talking about a hot tub on the on an MCAT passage potentially, right?
Yeah, that's what you get for Silicon Valley. They do weird things.
Right. So in a hot tub, so imagine yourself in a hot tub at some hotel, or I don't know, maybe you have a rich cousin or some mansion. Who knows? Maybe you have a mansion. All right. And physicist Seth Lloyd. I don't imagine physicists in hot tubs.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
Okay. So some guy, his name is Seth. I like to, like, when I see a name, I like to picture the person. Like, to me, a Seth reminds me of like someone I like back in the day. Like, oh yeah, that's Seth from high school or what. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter as long as you put a picture or put a face to the name.
Interesting.
I think it'll help you keep track of the name a lot better.
Yeah. So I would picture Seth Rogen, because that's the Seth that I know. Like, that would pop in.
Seth Rogen, whoever.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Pitched a quantum internet application. Whoa. What?
Yeah.
A quantum internet. So quantum physics, I know what quantum, kind of means. Internet application. Okay, now I'm thinking, is this like iOS app, right? Like what does this mean, right? Mm-hmm. So just think something in the internet, something on the internet. To Google's Sergey Brin and Larry Page. So it's kind of weird how they said it. Does Google own Sergey Brin and Larry Page? Right? Like, what is that trying to say here? Like, mm-hmm. what do you think it's trying to? Because a lot of students are confused. Is Google, what is Google, right? But obviously, in this time and age, we all know what Google is. It's a company. So we all also know it's based on the internet. So if Google, with Google in a possessive term, Google's, right? Sergey Brin and Larry Page. Maybe Sergey Brin and Larry Page work at Google. Maybe they're a part of Google. You don't need to know this, but they're the actual founders of Google. Yeah. So that gives you a good idea of what we're talking about. Now, I forgot one other word, pitched. Yeah. What does that mean, pitched?
So in baseball terms, it means you're throwing something. In this term, pitched is I'm going to tell you something that I want you to buy, or that I think you'd be interested in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just shot in the dark. Let's see if you like it. Let's see if you want to be a part of it. Now, a lot of students are thinking, well, how am I supposed to know that there are people that go to these Google people
in hot tubs
and offer them, ideas for businesses and stuff? And you don't need to know that much. You just need to know that, hey, look, there's this guy Seth. He's giving an idea to these other two guys, right? And then we just keep reading, and hopefully you'll clear it up. You don't need to understand every little aspect of the sentence to get the bigger picture.
Okay.
So, make sure if you're listening at home, don't feel like you have to know everything, because you may not know what quantum internet application is, or you may not even know what pitched means. But as long as you realize that there's some kind of verb going on here, there's some kind of action happening, I think you're fine.
In the hot tub. He called it Quoogle, Quoogle, a search engine that, using mathematics based on the physics of subatomic particles, returns results without ever actually knowing the query. Quoogle, so a name that he's throwing out there, search engine. So I think most people would understand Google as a search engine, searching online for things. But this one specifically using math based on physics of subatomic particles, giving answers without knowing the query. So I'd be, again, that pre-med student who's like, I still have no idea what's going on here. Subatomic particles, I'm not really sure where that's going, why I'm being told that. Physics, I hate. I actually kind of liked physics, but physics in a Cars passage, I'm like, wait a minute, this is two worlds colliding here. So I'm still kind of lost as to where we're going.
Yeah, so again, you don't really need to know what mathematics based on physics of subatomic particles are. You don't need to know that. As long as you realize that there's some search engine that uses some new algorithm, you'll be fine, right? So trying to clump that together into another like kind of verb, really, like it's presenting something, it's doing something. If you know what quantum is, it's more based on the subatomic particle stuff that they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So you could relate quantum to that, but you don't need to. Again, they are educating you. So they're telling you quantum internet application is really mathematics based on physics, but you don't need to know that. Returns results without ever actually knowing the query. So what does that mean? Returns results. What do we know about Google? What does it do? What is it? What is a search engine really?
Well, if I go to Google and type in who is Jack Westin, then I get a result of saying Jack Westin is the amazing cars teacher.
Right. So exactly. So it's just a way to present stuff, right? So returns results. You should just realize that when we're talking about search engines, we're talking about what comes up when you click enter, right? So that's something that you have to kind of picture when you read search engines, right? And that helps you with the whole returns results. So we know this Google thing or whatever it's called does something similar to Google, but what does it do that's different without ever actually knowing the query? What does that mean?
The query is what I type in. So who is Jack Westin is what I type in, and supposedly it's returning results without ever actually knowing what the question is, which kind of seems crazy.
Right, exactly. So you can kind of base it off the root of the word, right, or the beginning of the word, really, QUE, right? So you can kind of guess it's probably something to do with the question, right? As we all know, you have to ask a question to get a result. So it's kind of weird. You're getting a result without even asking a question. Seems very sophisticated, very modern, very futuristic here. Okay, let's go ahead and continue reading.
Such an advance would require an entirely new kind of memory called QRAM, or quantum random access memory. So it's saying if this new Google were something, then there would also need to be this other new thing called QRAM, quantum random access memory.
That's it. That's all. So you don't need to know exactly what this quantum internet application is. All you need to do is realize it needs QRAM. That's it. So if you realize that there's this dude, Seth, in a hot tub, right, saying, look, we can do this if we had QRAM, you're good. That's all you need to know. Everything else is just distracting you, trying to intimidate you, trying to make you nervous for no reason. Okay?
Though intrigued, Bryn and Page turned the idea down, Lloyd told Gizmodo. So apparently his hot tub pitch was not received well, and they turned him down.
Okay.
According to his story, they reminded him that their business model was based on knowing everything about everyone. So the business model, using their business model, so again, we have that possessive of Google and Sergey and Larry. So their business model, Google's business model, is based on knowing everything about everyone, and that maybe the how that happens doesn't really matter. They just care about what.
Right. So there's a lot going on here. They're telling us, without actually saying it directly, that if you don't ask questions, then you're not going to have that knowledge, right? That Google wants. Google wants your knowledge. They want to know everything about everyone. And it seems like this new Google idea doesn't go with that. You don't know a lot about people if you use this Google idea, right? So a lot here going on. Basically, you just have to realize Google wants to know a lot about you, which is kind of scary. And
they know
also,
a lot about us.
Right. And also that Google is not consistent with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really, really important. Great. Okay, let's go ahead.
But QRAM as an idea hasn't died. So bringing back up that first paragraph that we need this new kind of memory for the Google to work, there's this QRAM, quantum random access memory, that apparently that idea is still floating around.
Right. Do you need to know a lot about RAM in general to know what QRAM? No. Yeah, I mean, you may know what RAM is. You may have built a computer. You don't need
several.
Okay. Right.
Today's computers are quite good at remembering data represented by billions of bits, binary code digits that can equal either 0 or 1. So now we're nerding out a little bit on some more computer technology, basically saying computers are good at remembering these bits. And what are those bits? They're zeros and ones. binary code. I might not know what that means, but it just says digits that are equal to 0 or 1.
Yeah, sounds good. Bi means what? Two.
Two.
So 0 and 1 are two different kind of numbers, I guess. Great. Yeah, and this is where a lot of students start becoming Sherlock Holmes. This is where they start becoming detectives. They feel like they know what's going on. You don't need to pretend. If you don't know what's going on, that's okay. Don't be a hero, right? Just continue reading. Try your best to understand it, but don't confuse yourself by, being too smart or trying to figure things out, try to puzzle things together. That's not necessary. Okay, let's go ahead.
As you're reading, are you supposed to start like, oh, I see where this is going, or should you not try to trick yourself or not try to think that and just read it for what it is?
Read it for what it is. At the end of the passage, you can go, oh, I see where it's going, but not as you're reading, because that's a false sense of security, and that could actually deviate you from what is actually being discussed, because you may bring in your own bias in what you understand, and it might go against or be inconsistent with what the author's saying.
Okay. RAM, or random access memory, stores the data short-term on silicon chips, assigning each piece of data a unique address that can be accessed randomly in any order to refer to the data later. So now it's giving us an idea of what RAM is. If we didn't know what it is before, now it's trying to teach us. Kind of like last week's episode, it taught us what insulin does. Now we're learning about RAM here and how it works.
Sounds good.
It makes computer processes much faster, allowing your laptop or phone to quickly access the RAM for data frequently used by programs, rather than the storage, which is much, much slower. So now it's making a comparison, talking about RAM being fast and storage, whatever that is, whatever they're referring to, as being slower, and how RAM is why our phones or our computers are fast. So I could see a question here about why are your computers fast, and is it storage or is it RAM? And you have to remember to pick out this part.
Well, so the MCAT does not ask specific questions about the difference between RAM and storage, but knowing that distinction can help you solve problems. So they might throw in random bad answer choices that mention storage in a way that wasn't really discussed, or RAM in a way that wasn't discussed, but they're probably not going to confuse you with RAM and storage. It's just good to know this as general background knowledge. But yeah, absolutely, just understanding things is the way to go. Just like what we talked about last week. When it comes to the MCAT, what they like to do is they like to set the scene. So I don't know if you remember, but it took 3 paragraphs in order for them to kind of set the scene. They started, giving us the mechanism of things, right? How things work. This is also doing that. It's telling us how things work, right? How computers work.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But one day in the future, computer processors might be supplanted or augmented by quantum computer processors. Machines that would be good at searching through huge data sets, machine learning, and artificial intelligence applications. So quantum computer processors. So the author is saying, hey, there's this other technology out there, quantum computer processors, which I don't think have been mentioned yet, that may apparently be better than RAM, faster than RAM, as they're talking here.
Well, what did we talk about in regards to quantum? What were we talking about?
We're talking about quantum RAM.
Right. So maybe quantum computer processors is another way of presenting QRAM. Remember, they'll like to use different words to express the same thing. Just like I'm not going to bring up the last passage or article as much, but remember sugar and glucose? They mention sugar with glucose next to it, and they all of a sudden use just the word glucose to represent sugar. Same thing here. You may not know what quantum computer processors are, but they're probably related to QRAM.
Okay.
Right. Also, there's a couple of words here that are kind of confusing. Might be supplanted or augmented. So you may not know what the word supplanted means, right? How do you feel about that word, Ryan?
I am not too familiar with it, but it's next to augmented, and I kind of know what augmented means, like changed.
Yeah, that's it. Distorted, changed.
Mm-hmm.
So if they ever say a word and then they say or, that just means you could use either word. So that's a good way of trying to figure out what it means. So if they ever say, oh, so and so or augmented, they mean the same thing or roughly the same thing.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, what's going on? Just to recap, Ryan, what is going on in this sentence?
That there are these quantum computer processors, which may be related to QRAM, that are coming down the pike at some point, apparently, to make things much faster.
Right. Now, what does it mean when they say huge data sets? They kind of refer to that before, but what is that exactly?
Well, they talked about what RAM is and how it stores data, and so I'm assuming data sets are just really large amounts of data.
Yeah, and they even say huge. So
yeah.
What do they associate with huge data sets? What are the things that may require huge data sets?
I don't know.
Look at the words next to it.
Oh, machine learning and artificial intelligence applications. Okay,
right.
So that's what it's saying.
So those things may require QRAM because you may need this thing that can do more work, that can pick up or do things faster in a sea of data, right? So that gives you an idea of what's going on. They're teaching you. They're literally teaching you that machine learning and artificial intelligence have huge data sets, and they may need quantum stuff. Okay.
Quantum computers are still a nascent technology, but if they're ever going to be able to run these potentially lucrative algorithms, they'll need to access RAM in a whole new way. So, quantum computers, still a nascent. So nascent, I'd have to think through what that means. Lucrative algorithms. So they're saying something here is going to make somebody money, and that we'll need this potentially QRAM because it says we'll need to access RAM in a whole new way, which is what they're saying QRAM is all about. So we'll need these computers to make lots of money.
That's it. Now you looked at that word nascent and you were thinking, whoa, do I need to know what that means? You don't need to. I mean, if you keep reading, they say if they're ever going to be able to run these. So are they currently running them?
Nope.
No, nascent probably means it's new, it's novel, it's something that is rudimentary at least. We don't really know exactly what nascent means, but it's probably something to do with how it's not being used. Okay, sounds good. Let's keep going. You have one little sentence.
It says they'll require QRAM. So that's just kind of pointing out what I said at the end, that they'll need it. How they'll access this RAM in a whole new way will be QRAM.
Sounds good. So what's the big idea of this paragraph?
That QRAM apparently is needed for the future of our computing needs.
That's it. Great. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. In quotes, QRAM would be an amazing application and make the kind of quantum devices that Google and IBM make today instantaneously useful, Lloyd told Gizmodo. So he's trying to back up. This is Lloyd, who was in the hot tub pitching. He's basically saying QRAM is what we need to make what Google and IBM are making. It would make it much more useful, because apparently what they're making now isn't very useful.
So is this similar to the previous paragraph, or would you say it's different?
I would say that this is probably the same as the previous paragraph.
Right, and they're just bringing in Lloyd again, right? Our great hot tub friend, and yeah, just supporting it. That's really it. Great. All right, so let's go ahead.
Classical computers like ThinkPads, iPhones, and the best high-performance supercomputers perform all their operations by translating data into one or many combinations of bit values, zeros and ones. So it's kind of teaching us a little bit more, talking about ThinkPads and iPhones. I don't know if I understand what a ThinkPad is. Obviously, I know what it is as an IBM computer, but maybe the person reading it might not know. But I think most people know what an iPhone is, so they can picture that. And so it's teaching us that they all work by translating data into zeros and ones.
Right. Again, they said iPhones. So you could probably think ThinkPads are related to iPhones, and you can imagine what those are. Great. Okay, let's go ahead.
The bits interact, then the final result is another combination of ones and zeros. So again, a little bit more explaining how these things work. The zeros and ones, it's working by translating data into the zeros and ones. They interact, and then you get more zeros and ones.
Yep. Okay.
Quantum computers also spit out a final result of ones and zeros. So making the comparison now from quantum computers to iPhones, they're saying, yeah, they work the same way with zeros and ones.
All right.
But while the calculation is occurring, their quantum bits, or qubits, communicate with one another in a new way through the same rules of physics that govern electrons. Interesting. So now it's giving us, while the result may be similar, what's happening during it is much, much different. There's this physics stuff going on.
Right, this interaction, communication.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how they use the word or again. Quantum bits or qubits. So they may just use the word qubits, and that means the same thing as quantum bits. I mean, it's very basic, but it can teach you a lot about how they grammatically form these sentences. Okay?
Rather than just equaling 1 or 0, a single qubit could be a little bit of both during the calculation, as governed by a special mathematical equation that encodes the probability you'll get a 0 or a 1 when you actually measure the qubit's value. So it's explaining a little bit more of these qubits, how they're communicating, and what happens with that communication. That everything it's told us is there's these binary from an earlier paragraph, 0 and 1, 0 and 1. And now it's saying, hey, these qubits might not be 0 or 1. They could be a little bit different.
That's it. So they're different in some way. You don't need to be a physicist to understand this. You just have to realize that it's not necessarily 0 or 1. It may be kind of a combination or a mixture. That's all you need to know. So great. So qubits could have a mixture. The other stuff, maybe not a mixture, maybe just 1 or 2, or 0 or 1. Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Multiple qubits have more complex equations that treat combinations of qubit values as single mathematical objects. Oh, so that was a dense sentence. Multiple qubits have more complex equations. So I'm not sure where the equations are coming in, why qubits have equations, but treating combinations of qubit values as a single mathematical object. So I'm kind of I would be thrown off with this sentence because I'm not sure what it's trying to tell me.
You know, it's a tough sentence. It's a very tough sentence, but we've read so much. We know so much. I mean, what do you know so far, Ryan? What do we have right now?
We have that computers work on zeros and ones, and that qubits might not be 0 or 1, and that they could be not a 0 or not a 1 completely.
Right, and that seems to be more advanced, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So who cares if we don't get this sentence completely? Try your best, right? But the key here is not to panic or feel like, oh, I don't get every sentence. Yeah, they said something about more complex equations, but is that really changing the course of what we're talking about? I don't think so.
Okay.
So try your best, but if you don't get this sentence, let it go. Move on, right? So just try your best. That's it. And yeah, they are, I mean, if to break it down, more complex equations, something to do with combinations, and it seems like there's some kind of mathematical object being developed here. Again, very complex stuff that no student should really understand completely. Not necessary. They're not going to test this. Mm-hmm. They will not say, "Oh, what do multiple qubits do?" They'll never test that. Okay, yeah. That's not the MCAT. All right, let's go ahead.
The end result is one or several possible binary strings with the final value given to the user determined by the probabilities encoded in the equations. So it's basically wrapping up here and saying that the end result is not just zeros and ones, but kind of a statistical probability of what may be the 0 or 1. That's very strange.
Very strange, but it should remind. I mean, there are some students here that understand quantum stuff. Maybe like electrons ring a bell, orbitals ring a bell. So this it actually sounds more of like a physical passage where they bring in stuff that you may not be familiar with. And this is where cars can kind of sound like the other sections, or the other sections can sound like cars. This is a very good example, like these past sentences we just read, of what they would include in a physical passage that sounds similar to some concept you've already studied. So they're kind of referring to orbitals here, right? Orbitals is the probability that an electron exists, right, within a region. So it kind of sounds like that, but they don't call it that. They don't call it orbitals. And you might even get questions on orbitals on the physical section with respect to this kind of passage. So this could be a physical passage. It could also be a cars passage. This is why they call the new MCAT very cars, right? So they throw in a lot of things that you may not know off the top of your head, but if you read it, you should be able to understand it. This is a good example of a passage that you may not be interested in, but it could very well be on your test. So I recommend that you try to broaden your reading range. Try to read a lot of different types of articles, passages, and this could fall under one of those topics you may not like. So keep practicing it.
All right, so there you have it. Another amazing MCAT Cars podcast, this time with hot tubs and quantum internet applications. Interesting. Didn't think we'd go there with the MCAT Cars podcast, but that was a good one. If you are looking to increase your score on the MCAT Cars podcast and you need something a little bit more than what we are doing here on this podcast, go check out jackwestin.com and the MCAT Cars strategy course, where you get over 70 hours of instruction, an interactive online classroom, personalized attention with constant feedback, and much, much more. And guess what? You can do it in installments, 10 weekly installments. If you go to medicalschoolhq.net/JackWestin, that'll automatically activate a $100 coupon that you can use with the MCAT Cars strategy course. Again, that's medicalschoolhq.net/JackWestin, or text the word CARS coupon to 44222. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time on the MCAT Cars podcast. When you use the links provided in this podcast, you're helping to support MedEd Media and the podcasts that we produce. Not only do you get a discount, but we earn a small commission as well. Thank you for your support.